So I thought I'd start with taking you through my typical headshot retouch workflow. I find where you do an edit is as important as the edit itself. You get it wrong and retouch can very quickly become rework, and nobody enjoys doing that. So this might be one of the most boring videos on YouTube once I post it, but I find it's important and it's an important place to start. So let's get at her. From the camera, raw file into Capture One. I have a couple of global presets that I apply. I find the ICC profile useful for doing gross corrections on color. Nikon tends to shoot red with Capture One. The ICC profile I use fixes that. It tends to desaturate, so I saturate up. And I might do a couple of lens corrections if I find the vignetting too high. I then tweak. My goal in Capture One is to get the skin tones as close as I can get. I'm not trying to change or correct for differences in skin tone, but the majority of the skin tone is my goal. I will fix mismatched skin tones later. I tend to shoot underexposed, so my first correction would be to bring the exposure up, but like not a lot, like 2/10 of a stop. I don't want to blow the image out in the raw file because it's hard coming back. Most of my color tweaks are in levels. I find that gives me just a little bit more control. White balance I use occasionally. I find it just doesn't work for my eye. I then do some fixes that I find are easier on the raw file. Some dodge and burn if I've missed my lighting a little bit. Some HDR to adjust the highlights and the shadows. Layers, most of the time it's bringing the white background up to pure white. I do that here. I then convert to a PSD file to Affinity Photo. Yeah, I know there's some irony in that. My first in Affinity Photo is what I call no regret fixes. These are the things I know the client are not going to have an issue with. Take the lights out. If I have an intended crop that's bigger than what I shot, I would extend the background. Grafting, some would call it cut and pasting from one image to another image. If there's an element that you have in one that you like better, but there's another shot that overall is a better shot, I might pull that element from one image to another. And liquefy here, I either do it right at the beginning or right at the end. I have another liquefy step at the end. This one tends to be the ones that I know I need to fix and I can fix readily, and I'm not going to not fix it. Color gaps fit into this one, for example. Next up is the traditional, retouch as we understand it to be, the heavy lifting. First is the heel, clone, in paint, fixing all the little niggly details, the stray hairs, the lint, the skin imperfections that I know I'm going to get rid of. Next up is hair. That is the black hole of retouch. My only advice to you is get it right in camera because you could spend hours fixing hair. Next up is extractions or masks. I do that here before my layer stack gets too deep. I would typically have a plan written down in terms of what I want to do in the image, so I would know what masks I would need up front, and I would create those here. Frequency separation is next. Sounds fancy. It's simply taking that base image that you've generated at this point and creating two layers from that image, a blurred or low frequency layer, and then an offsetting high frequency sharpened overlay, really. So a blurred layer and a sharpened layer. And together they replicate your base image. And a lot of my work fits between the two layers. So my adjustment sits between the low frequency and the high frequency layer. Therefore, I'm preserving the high frequency sharpened detail. And I find that generates a better image. So this is where I would match the skin tones. So back in Capture One, I got the skin tone largely correct. At this point, I'm now doing the skin tone matching. So if there's a part of the face that has a different skin tone, I would adjust it. If the hand is in the shot, I know that's not for us, but some guys like that. And the hand is a different color, I would fix that. I would do a little bit of dodge and burn work here just to add some contrast. I would do specific fixes. These are the things like teeth whitening. I might do changing the background. If I'm shooting on gray and because of my skin tone work, the gray has turned either blue or red, I would take that out at this point. Then I would do an overall color grade. I might fix specific colors. If the sweater doesn't work with the rest of the color tone of the image, I might change the sweater hue a bit. I can add some tone map for grit, and really at that point the image is done. The last thing I would do would be subjective liquefy. These are the things where I think it's necessary to make the image better, but I'm not sure if the client would agree. So if I do it last, if I've gone too far or not far enough, it's easy to fix because all of the heavy lifting, all of the reworking is done, and these layers can be toggled on and off. So next up, I overwrite the PSD file back into Capture One, and I also save the original Affinity photo file. The PSD file going back tends to be flattened, and I want to preserve my layers. I then do a consistency adjustment. I push all of the images of a session through essentially parallel. So I do all of the skin tone raw file fixes together. I do a lot of the Affinity photo fixes together. And then when I bring it back in, I'm looking to make sure that I haven't pushed one image farther than another. And I would either correct it here or go back to the Affinity file and fix it there. But I want to make sure that I've got a consistency across all the edits that I've done. I then just stamp out multiple variants of each PSD file. Simple to do, and this is where then I offer multiple crops. A standard crop would be top of the head, both shoulders. Then the standard offset, tighter crop, maybe a square crop. I also do my black and white conversion here. And then if one image, for example, would have 6 variants of various crops in black and white, each one of those variants then gets output in both print and web resolutions. And the output is JPEG, and I deliver that to the client. That's my workflow. I don't do everything on every image, but I have done everything on this workflow on at least one image. And what I would like to do is, as I post more videos in terms of specific fixes or things that I do, is also indicate where in this workflow I would tend to do them. And I find that context is useful. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that interesting and not too boring. And I'm now going to start making other videos. Thanks for watching. Cheers.